And I want to say that slavery is capitalism perfected. We have to understand that the bigger the player, and I refer to them as titans, titans of industry to be specific, because when we are dealing with this level and we're dealing with that body of people, we have to understand that they have the resources, they have the human capital, and they have the actual assets to be able to execute on all of the debauchery that they speak. We have to understand that, yo, another episode of From the Hood to the Hill with your boy, the Black Anglo-Saxon. Today we coming back with another episode to talk about and finish up the conversation in and around the de facto versus the de jure. And today I have a perfect example exactly of what I mean and how it works and how it functions and all the things that go into it in terms of understanding the proximity and how the sausage is made and the difference between having something on paper versus having that thing operate in theory or academia, right? Because when we had these conversations, I am always trying to pull it away from what and how people see it operate in a theoretical sense and rather a on the ground, more contextualized, synthesized assessment of what we're actually witnessing. And I want to say that slavery is capitalism perfected. And I want to say shout out to Yvette Cornell. Everybody go follow her. That is YVETTE Carnell at Breaking Brown, because she will go down as one of the greatest philosophers and political scientists of our time. Just wait for it. But everything that I've talked about and we talked about here, in terms of the video that I made about pulling slavery away from hatred, away from emotion, and just understanding it as a business model, an economic framework, and how it entrenches itself in the legal, social, as well as economic apparatus of the country and the nation, and how it basically reinvents itself to be able to fulfill its insatiable appetite is everything that encapsulates that phrase. Slavery is capitalism perfected. That is the trajectory. Now, I am going to share my screen of this young brother who is talking about the difference between having the ability and capacity to file a patent and how it actually works up close. Now, here we go.
I very intentionally do not have my technology patented. Why? Because the patent industry is actually very corrupt. I learned this because I, at one point, was patent pending. And then one day I went to a Rotary Club meeting and I spoke with the inventor of the wireless key fob for cars. And he told me, GM stole my stuff. So, and I said, well, you have a patent, didn't you? And he's like, yo, I have like 70 patents. And I've been to every country on earth almost. I'm like, so how'd they steal your stuff with the patent? He's like, because a patent doesn't mean anything to big players. All a patent is a means for you to go to court and say, hey, they infringed on my patent. But when you're in court, that's a whole different story. Now you're in court, and now you have to prove to the judge that they infringed on your patent. Now you need to fight their lawyers. Okay, you're an inventor, you came up with something, and you're fighting this big industry that has billions of dollars, and they can just go to court over and over and over again and take you and fight you.
Now, I'm gonna stop it there because I want to have a conversation about something that we always talk about and discuss. And y'all know I use the term legal mercenaries, and I use that term for a very specific reason, because exactly what he's talking about right here. So we have to understand that the bigger the player, and I refer to them as titans, titans of industry to be specific, because when we are dealing with this level and we're dealing with that body of people, we have to understand that they have the resources, they have the human capital, and they have the actual assets to be able to execute on all of the debauchery that they speak, right? So when you hear a person make a statement that you may feel like is hyperbolic or that you feel as though is outlandish, you must hold that to be true because they have the resources to execute on that. Now, what is he talking about when he's talking about the fact that the patents don't matter because it's a corrupt system? It's because the incentive structure is built in such a way that if I have resources to execute on an idea, the patent office becomes a repository of information and ideas that I can use and take advantage of because there is nobody to actually pose any opposition to me because those who are usually in many cases filing either they are starting something new or they are in a place where they've done research and development and pulled a lot of uh, assets and capital into a particular thing. So, with that understanding, I know that you've deleveraged in a way if I'm a company looking at that. And so, what happens then is okay, I used the example last time in my last video talking about how Apple brought in the black tech businesses into these workshops, into these symposiums to steal their idea. And it is done in that way because, as he said, on paper, yes, you have a contract, but contracts only are as good as what you can defend. And not only as good as what you can defend, also in how long you can last. And that's the other part. And that's why we have to not just think about these things in a very academic, theoretical way. We have to realize and embrace and assess how they're being operationalized. Because it's one thing to say that you have merit and that you have good standing with your argument. But then, second behind that must come how much and how many assets and resources do you have to withstand the pace, the time, the effort, the energy? Because let's say even you got the money, right? Do you have the capacity? Does your organization have the overall capacity to be able to fight it? Because as I always talk about, they have teams of legal mercenaries ready to just rock and roll and go and attack anything that they basically hone in on. And we have to be careful of that. And we have to understand that these very things that have been put in place to work in our advantage to be things of good have been manipulated and turned into destructive assets, turned into places that can be weaponized against the very people in which it was built to protect, because that's what capitalism, the institutions within it, do. They eat, they devour, and they find new and innovative ways to disrupt, devour, and dissipate anything that may challenge and stand in its way. And we have to be very, very, very clear that I and we are not talking about what it is on paper, because we, the people, can have the greatest argument every single time. But it does not matter if you don't have the power, the assets, the resources, the human capital, the social capital, the legal capital to fight these battles. So you then have to think about and figure out, how do you restructure everything in a way? How do you create leverage in a way that allows you to push back? What can I lose? What can I cut off to add value or create a safe haven, in a sense, to be able to mitigate this damage, to mitigate the ability that has been given to corporations to completely obliterate anything in its path. We have Elon Musk, and I'll be talking about it in a different episode. And he is suing the government because the government is discriminating against what he feels like is his right to discriminate. We have to be very vigilant right now in this moment in time, in this era, because we have not addressed the core issues and the core reticence of what America actually is. And for those who are watching and may not be of the ideological framework that I am talking about, it is pervasive in the way that our corporations are national and have went into different nations to perpetuate and recreate these same models that other countries are being influenced and falling to right now at this very moment, because that's what capital does. That is what capital does. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna reshare so so we can finish watching this.
Jure fight you, and so you have no money left. So even though you know they stole your thing, you can't prove it anymore because all they have to do is keep rebutting it in court over and over again. They have the funds to do that. You don't, because you're not GM, you're not whoever, you know. And so he told me, he's like, the truth is, if you want something to be yours, because when you patent something, it becomes public knowledge. It gets published on the patent directory.
Mhm.
I know that because I literally looked up patents for pyrolysis reactors to get inspiration to build mine. So that means anybody on Earth can look up your patent and see how it was built, how it was made, and then make a copy, make a few changes, and then say it was theirs. And then you can go and fight them, but that takes time, that takes money, and then at some point you can't do it anymore. You're trying to invent. You're not trying to be you know what I'm saying? Like, you're an inventor, not a lawyer.
Mhm.
Not trying to fight people in court for the rest of your life. So he told me that, and he's like, the key is really trade secrets. Think about it. He's like, Coca-Cola did not patent the Coca-Cola formula. Why? Because if they patented the formula,
Everybody would know it.
everybody would know it. Even though nobody can copy it, everybody would know it. And you best believe they copy it. Because guess what? In China, there's no patent law. It just goes to, that's why they have Chinese knockoffs of everything. They have no patent enforcement in China and so many other countries. So he's like, and guess what you have to do? You have to go and get a patent in every country on earth. You know how much that costs? So much money. And then you have to renew it.
Yeah,
And so you paid all this money that could have gone into your actual invention to get the patent, which means nothing because they'll just go and take it and copy it. Then you have to spend money fighting them in court. And then I heard this story from inventor after inventor after inventor, and they always said to me, trade secrets are the key.
What's trade secrets? You just don't tell anybody.
Trade secrets are things that you have that nobody knows. And I have a few trade secrets on my machine that nobody knows. That you can look at my machine on a video camera and not know these certain particular material sciences or where.
he's up here with details.
Exactly. But I have another play. So there's this thing called public domain. Once you have something published online for over a year, nobody can patent it. All my machines are public domain. Nobody can patent any of my machines because they've all been visible in the public for over a year.
That's because you're putting them on social media.
Exactly. So that saves things, because now there's no way a company can come and just shelf it, patent what I made, copy it, and shelf it and hide it. But then here's another approach I'm doing. I'm like, I do have trade secrets that I have, yes. The truth is, you will always have copycats. That's what it is. That's just how the world works. That's just how the market works. The key is being first to market.
Now, you hear him talk about trade secrets as well. And what I want to say about trade secrets is, let's take trade secrets and bring it into a term that we're familiar with: conspiracy. And the reason that I want to frame this in terms of conspiracy is because so I want to frame this in terms of conspiracy. We heard him talk about trade secrets, and I want to do it in this particular way because we often hear people talk about conspiracy theory. And I need people, if this is going to work and we're going to move forward collectively and make this whole project actually work, reframe how you think about conspiracy. Trade secrets are people sitting around documenting a set of institutional protocols. Y'all hear me talk about that all the time. And what they do is you, the person who is in proximity, holds that. That gets nowhere. And to further entrench that process, you have people sign what you call NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. And there are other forms of quote unquote soft despotism and things of that nature that are used to illustrate, or that are used to take away the ability for a person to go out and speak against and speak of the secrets themselves, because that is the competitive advantage. That is the conspiracy, so to speak, because we all in this room in proximity, even if we're not in the room, have the understanding of what makes this sausage run, but how the sausage is made. And that is the difference of thinking about conspiracy in a way of these people who just sit in dark rooms, which, for what we know, that might be true in some cases. But I'm talking about everyday stuff that might not get cast in that way, but it is that. And we have to frame it as such, because we have to begin to understand that there are things that are operationalized around us that are held close to the cloth so that we don't have an advantage or any type of response to it. And that is the reason why I talk about the de facto versus the de jure, because it does not matter what is on paper. For anybody who's ever worked in corporate, worked in an NGO, worked in government, you all get that company policy handbook, right? That company policy handbook is one set of rules. But there is another set of rules that happen within the building or within the space and the confines that sometimes go completely against what is in the actual policy. And people say, oh, well, that's unfair. No, what you're experiencing is the de facto versus the de jure. You got one set of rules on this company policy handbook that has been SOP'd, and that's how people are supposed to operate. That's the standard, that's the expectation. But then you have the other set of rules and the other set of standards that allow for things to move forward, that allow for people to pivot, that allow for people to even do what some may feel is unethical in some cases. And you have to be aware of that and understand that that is the de facto. That is the actual culture. That is the actual nature of the machine that you're in. The thing that you see in the handbook, just like when we see in academia, and the reason why I wouldn't necessarily, or I don't potentially want to go back, is because academia just functions as another weapon to politicians, to corporations who do and provide research and development, because academics at this point have no backbone, no spine. They are not activists. They do not have any type of organizing background in terms of going against the system, going against the actual institutions that they're in. They are only there to, I'm not even going to say think, because you have people who donate to these schools, donate to these institutions, who actually push forward the agenda. Because you have academics in a position, again, this is the de facto, where they are only producing what has been set forth. They can have a whole nother set of studies, a whole nother set of theses that don't ever make it to the light of day because whoever is donating, whoever is putting the money in the coffers for that specific department has decided that we don't want to hear that. We don't want to get that result. We don't want to hear that answer. Find another one. Run the experiment 5 more times till we get it to the answer that we want. That is a conspiracy. That is the de facto. That is capitalism expressing itself in a way that mutes voice. With Citizens United, we see capital gain massive amounts of leverage and the ability to silence because money now topples actual voice. The same way that the person, the corporation as a person, actually has more value than the actual living beings that we are. So this person over here, the corporate person, has more value than actual living human beings. And in Citizens United, we see the same concept, the same philosophy come about again. Because now, money, capital, expressed and classified as a voice, now has that much more leverage than actual voices. As we keep moving forward, humans get less and less and less leverage as we move forward. And that is why what Yvette Carnell said in terms of slavery is capitalism perfected is so profound because it is the trajectory and what I like to talk about, the exponential effect, the slope of where it leads. Not because somebody's evil, not because people are right, wrong, bad, good. It's because that is what the incentive structures are in this particular ideological framework. We must understand that it is vapid. Ideas are vessels. They are as good as the wielders of them please them to be, or so choose them to be. So I want us to understand, because a lot of people like to talk, and I want you to know that if you don't have proximity to demonhood, if you don't and never had proximity to heathenry, if you don't and never had proximity to these institutions that people are out here theorizing, or the mechanics, if you've not been up close on it, caution yourself in speaking. Because right now, we're not talking about what's on paper. You can proverbially rip that Constitution, rip that paper up. The rules of engagement are fluid. They've always been fluid, and more so even now, because the realignment and the struggle for power that is currently happening right now. And I'm talking about power in nations, not just individual people. Yes, we see that. That's an everyday thing. That's a very micro thing. But in terms of even the nations, they're at odds because there is a struggle for power. There is a vacuum that is taking place, and people are trying to fill it. And let's not also rest on our loins, because even when you cut off the head of a snake, it still has the ability to bite. And I say that because everybody right now is, oh, well, we just got to make it through Donald Trump. We must start to think about what people are going to do after Trump, because the leaders that we pick after this are going to make or break us. The voices that we choose to elevate after this are going to make or break us. The frameworks that we are going to use after this is what's going to either save or kill this nation. If we remain in hubris we will surely perish as a national power or global power. If we continue to operate in the same manner that people are weaponizing against us, we will perish as a global power. If you remain silent, you are a part of the problem. Because I want everybody who loves to use that N word so much, and I'm not talking about Negro, nigga, Nazi. Everybody in Nazi Germany were not bad people. Most people made the decision to say, I'm not going to say nothing because I don't want to suffer any consequences. That's on them. But guess what? Just like they say, I forget how the saying goes or the quote goes, but it eventually becomes you. And as wealth calcifies in America and across the Western bloc, niggerdom will spread. And I welcome y'all to niggerdom because I've been lonely. We've been lonely. We hope now that y'all see. And for those who choose to come to America in this moment, welcome to Sodom and Gomorrah Part 2. I will caution you to understand that you are just additional fuel for a beast that has no appetite. That you will only be treated good up until you are no longer useful. Shout out to all of those who thought that they were above the program and thought that niggas were just lazy. We must understand as a nation, as a whole, as a collective, that our nature, the soil in which we were birthed, is bloodied. And this is not to crucify white people, because one of the things that I want, if you're watching this and you're white, the whole apologizing to black people and what these other black people feel like they want y'all to do. I don't need an apology. We don't need an apology. What we need is acknowledgement. The ability to understand that you have a bag full of money, blood money, in your hand. And it's that inheritance, because it hasn't been redistributed, is what's going to take away your freedoms, my freedoms, and a lot of other people's freedoms. Because it's in the wrong hands. It's still in the hands that made the land. We still dealing with the ghosts of the Hoovers, the ghosts of the Lincolns, the ghosts of all of these people who built institutions and legacy across pillage. And for those who will say, well, black folks just need to work, reparations is not a thing, understand that if you don't do it, because it is the core and central deed that drives all other things and motives and operations, you will suffer with us. Because you got lied to too. As you always hear me say, nigga lovers got too. It was never about any of the falsehoods. But y'all still eating off of that money, and it's costing you. Because again, this is not to get into white people are the worst and this and that. No. Your fathers were heathens. Those who put things in place, let me not even say your fathers, because a lot of it is across the board. Put things in place that now you're paying the cost for. My generation the same way. With black folk. We talk about why everything is so out of whack. Because the environment that was created for us by y'all fathers sisters, uncles, cousins, brothers, nephews, Nancy's. We perpetuated it and created a whole nother cycle, death cycle for our own selves. And you're probably at the point, if you made it here, you're thinking, what does this have to do with anything with the de facto and the de jure? Because America on paper is a capitalist nation, but it is not. It is socialism that flows to the top, always has been. America on paper is a country of democracy. It is not. Never has been. Only for the wealthy. And I mean the wealthy. And even they have restraints and chains, which is why we see the tech bros operating and moving in the way that they are, because they learned from the mistakes of the robber barons of the past. Those who are the builders of railroads, the builders of banking, the builders of 9-to-5 week, the builders of industrialization, they learned the same way America learned from Hitler, that soft despotism and that creating for them conglomerate monopolies, conglomerates, however you want to phrase it, where you put 10, 20 companies under one person to prevent it from being a true monopoly, but still operates as a monopoly, because we don't technically have monopolies. That's why we have antitrust laws on paper, but the de facto is that this is monopoly. It's the wild, wild west. It's do as thou wilt. The laws are only as good as they can be enforced. That's where we are. And it's important that you understand that. Because if you don't understand that, you cannot create any movement against a group of people who are willing to do anything, who love pain, who love torture, whose idea of a logical conclusion or a logical solution to the problem of the worlds that we're having is just, get rid of people, depopulate. Because that makes sense. If you just go on pure logic, pure precision, pure efficiency. If somebody said, look, man, we got too many deer out here eating the crops, so they creating havoc. Well, you know what? Let's go and have hunting season. It's that type of ideological framework that is bred out of being strictly logical. When you remove empathy and all of the other things, that is, again, capitalism perfected, insatiable. But I'm not going to continue because I don't want to be redundant. But I really, really, really want us to understand there is no future, or there is a future. Don't let me not say that. The future that y'all want is tied to a fight. And if you're not willing to do that, and I'm not talking about these fights that are misaligned or sporadic, like the person who burned down this warehouse. With all due respect, the intention was good, but that's stupid, because there's one person, you didn't really hurt the people in the class that you were trying to hurt, and you're only giving them leverage to unleash a whole nother set of weaponry, a whole nother set of draconian laws, because you don't understand the psychology of the people that you're dealing with, or the system that you're dealing with. But what do I know? Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe.